Hey, it's State of State. We got your Nittany Lion update. It's a football discussion with Tom and Justin, so kick back and press play.
With former Penn State and NFL defensive back Justin King, I'm Tom Hannafin. This is State of State. This podcast is presented by BetOnline. Basketball fans, it's that time of year again. The NBA is back. From opening tip-off to buzzer beaters, BetOnline has you covered with the best odds, biggest promotions, and live in-game betting on all your favorite teams. This season, every game matters. BetOnline is every stat, matchup breakdown, and live odds to bet on during the game. And it's not just the NBA. BetOnline is odds on everything from football, the MLB playoffs, the NHL, to political props. Head to betonline.ag today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. State of State is presented by BetOnline. The game starts here. State of State is proud to partner with Illumination Brewing for another season of crafting State IPA, the perfect tailgate and game day beer for Penn State football fans. State IPA is available now at your local beer distributor, grocery store, plus select bars and restaurants. Visit illuminationbrewing.com/beer/state-IPA to learn more. Must be 21 years or older to purchase. Please drink responsibly. Also, State of State is a proud supporter of Blue White Outfitters. Blue White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. Check out their Lockdown U and Lawn Boys merchandise today. All sales from Blue White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Also, official State of State merchandise is available now. Support the show and grab State of State t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and more. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today. Saturday at 12 p.m. Eastern on Fox, the number 3 Penn State Nittany Lions will host the number 4 Ohio State Buckeyes at Beaver Stadium. This is far and away the biggest game of the year for the Penn State Nittany Lions, and it will have immense ramifications on how the remainder of the 2024 season goes for PSU football. We are going to dive into a full game preview here on State of State. Like, comment, subscribe, rate us, turn on notifications. As always, get at us on social media at State of State Pod. Get in our comments section on YouTube and become a member of our YouTube channel now to get ad-free shows, commercial-free shows for State of State. All upcoming episodes of State of State, including our entire members-only playlist, is ad-free, and you can get it for just 99 cents a month. Hit the join button on the homepage of our YouTube channel, or you can follow the link in the description of this podcast. Justin, before we dive into Ohio State, any final thoughts on Penn State's road night game victory at Wisconsin this past weekend?
Another example of being battle tested, which is going to really matter when it comes down to the end in December and January. And nice gritty win. Again, overall complete team in the different ways that we can approach or attack teams and defend them. So, I mean, overall, feel good about it moving into this next week.
Completely agree. It's literally the biggest game on Penn State's schedule. It's exactly what everybody was thinking and hoping for in the offseason when this game was announced, the potential of Penn State hosting a top 5 Ohio State team. It's a little different in that there were possibly people out there thinking that Ohio State could be undefeated going into this game. And granted, had things gone a little bit different out in Eugene, Oregon, there's a possibility that Ohio State could have been undefeated going into this game. But it's not so much that Ohio State lost to Oregon by a point. It's more the fact that this past weekend, Ohio State hosted Nebraska and escaped the Cornhuskers by a score of 21-17. Ohio State was 1 of 10 on third down, struggled to run the ball, and certainly created some questions for their defense that have to be answered. On the flip side, Penn State has a bevy of injuries going into this game that are big question marks. James Franklin, speaking earlier on this week, gave some answers, didn't give a lot of answers, and we'll get into that in a moment, which was exactly what I was hoping he would do, was saying, hey, these will be game time decisions. And that makes all the sense in the world. Why would you come out early in the week and say, yep, this is good to go, that sort of thing. So that's the right gamesmanship for that. As you look at this game, how do you feel about Penn State's chances?
I feel real good about Penn State's chances. I think we actually match up with them well. I think Ohio State is obviously explosive, a lot of cash into that roster, but beyond that, I think Penn State is like they don't have too many holes in their attack or their defense, right? And I think when it comes down to it, it's gonna be a close game, and without out not being a night game, I don't know if that even really matters too much, but I'm looking for, a dogfight, and I'm looking for Penn State to come out on top just in terms of the consistency and how they've been moving. Right, we haven't had like too much of a roller coaster. You might say USC's first half into second half might look like a little bit of a roller coaster ride and exciting, but like Ohio State's been less consistent than I think Penn State has, right? So as long as we kind of bottle up those guys like the Jeremiah Smith and the running back Sean and do different things of that nature and not let them have explosive plays, I think we're built to beat anybody. So I think this is it's a strong matchup and a nice opportunity to put to bed everyone that says, hey, they still haven't beat anybody yet.
There's a lot of ways that this game can go that will affect Penn State's season, the remainder of their season, but we got to see how things shake out first. Let's start where we absolutely have to start. Penn State's quarterback situation. Drew Aller gets hurt at the back end of the second quarter at Wisconsin. In comes Bo Pribula. Pribula plays a really solid game, 11 of 13, roughly 100 yards passing, executed the offense well. You saw how the play calling changed under offensive coordinator Andy Kotelnicki, and that's something James Franklin talked about earlier this week, was how he reminded Andy Kotelnicki going into the second half is that we have to call this game differently because Bo has a different skill set than Drew Aller. And I'm sure that was something Andy Kotelnicki was thinking about going into the game. And it was so funny. You and I were discussing going into the Wisconsin game. I had watched the way Wisconsin had played against Northwestern. Northwestern does a lot of option, has a faster, more mobile quarterback. And I was like, man, that option game might work pretty well against Wisconsin. Even though Wisconsin won that game by a score of 23-3, there were still instances where it was like, Penn State could take advantage of this with better personnel. And sure enough, that was the bulk of the second half, is Bo Pribula just had Wisconsin guessing with the RPO game. And it was very, very well executed. So now going into Ohio State, James Franklin said Drew Aller is going to be a game time decision. Bo Pribula and Drew Aller, as far as we know, are going to be splitting snaps this week, getting ready for the game. And then James Franklin went as far as to say is the number 3 quarterback, Ethan Grunkemeyer, who the program apparently thinks the world of and is this blend of skills between Aller and Pribula, is going to have to be available because, say, if there's a world where Drew Aller can't play, all of a sudden Ethan Grunkemeyer is the number 2 quarterback, and you have to be ready to get in there. Considering all of those factors, how do you think the quarterback position is going to look this Saturday?
I mean, if it's going to be a game time decision when it comes down to Drew, I mean, even if they have a 2 quarterback type setup, it's hard to defend, right? Especially when you have a guy that's a little bit more mobile like Bo, and then you have someone with a big arm and Drew. But the way that Drew's been playing, I mean, I think it's just been encouraging to put the onus on the defense to prepare for both, right? Because I think there's a completely different attack that you can go with it. And even if you like you talk about Gronk coming in and him being like a combination of both, it's hard to prepare for things that you haven't seen. So I think coming in with the multiple quarterback looks actually is interestingly in Penn State's favor. But Coach K has shown a great adaptability when it comes to different quarterbacks and how they want to attack the defense. So with that being said, it depends who plays to kind of anticipate what the offense is going to look like. But I think it's going to keep Ohio State on their heels so they can't just kind of tee off with athletes.
If Drew Aller can't play, can Penn State beat Ohio State with Bo Pribula?
It's an uphill battle, but I think they can. I think, again, because the way that they've positioned Drew, it's a core puzzle piece, obviously, as a quarterback, but the way that they've been playing, again, it's complete football. It's running the football in like manageable passing situations, defending well, making plays on defense, and just making sure that we continue to do that. And it seems like, again, Coach K has been coordinating the offense to expose the weaknesses and highlight our strengths. So if he continues to do that, I mean, we know what Bo can do, right? Like, it might look a little different than maybe Drew, but I think it can still execute. And I think they are more than capable of winning with Bo Pribula.
I agree with you. I still think Penn State's best chance to win is obviously if Drew Aller can play and is healthy enough to be mobile in the pocket. Again, different offensive schemes with Aller and Perbula, but I still believe Drew Aller's skill set gives Penn State the best chance to win. It was funny seeing the comment section for our recap episode of Penn State versus Wisconsin. There were a lot of the people who we've heard for years saying Bo's better than Drew. The offense works better with Bo than it does with Drew. Now you're going from two different offensive coordinators the last two seasons. So it's just kind of this season and last, excuse me. So we were not trying to come to that conclusion. I don't think that's not how I felt about it anyway, coming off of Wisconsin of, oh, Bo should be the guy now. No, I still think Penn State is better suited with Drew Aller starting at quarterback and playing hopefully healthy for this game against Ohio State, especially considering the way that the Nebraska game went. You have Dylan Raiola at quarterback, a freshman with a lot of ability as a quarterback and as a passer. It's just yet to be completely realized. There are going to be chances for Penn State to take advantage of this Ohio State secondary, in my opinion. From what you've watched of Ohio State this year, what holes do you see, if any, on their defense?
I mean, I think like you said, the secondary has been a little inconsistent. Like when you compare them to previous years, not having that top 15 type of draft pick, on the back end, and really they've been solid around, but just nothing extraordinary, right? So, like, I think they've been exploited by whether it's Oregon and some different teams. It's a matter of just capitalizing on those opportunities. But they're going to have athletes, and they're going to be able to run around and make plays and just kind of weather those storms. But I really believe the secondary and the receivers have to step up big time this week.
Caleb Downs is an outstanding safety, the transfer from Alabama. Denzel Burke, to your point about the Oregon game, he was abused in that game at Autzen Stadium. So it's not to say that he is not capable of being the first round pick that a lot of people think he could be, but still, I completely agree with you. There has been some inconsistencies with this Ohio State secondary. So to that point, I feel like Drew Aller's ability as a passer will be much more advantageous for Penn State to have on the field than Bo Perbula. And it's not to say that Bo had a bad game throwing the football against Wisconsin, but you saw the way that he was fitting things in very tight windows against the zone that Wisconsin was trying to throw out there. Those zones are going to be even tighter against Ohio State. Another thing is looking at this defensive line for Ohio State. Tui Molau and Sawyer are two outstanding defensive ends. They can certainly get after the quarterback. What do you think Penn State needs to do to negate that?
Loosen that with an efficient run game, I think, so they can't just tee off and kind of throw different blitzes on passing situations. I think that's number one. But beyond that, I think, again, Coach K has done a good job of mixing up different situations to where that isn't the case for the quarterback to just be a sitting duck, whether it's misdirections, moving things around. And the fact that you have Tyler Warren as the ultimate X factor in the middle of the field, that creates some level of mismatch when it comes to, whether it's blitzing or one-on-one matchups. But again, it's going to come down to, I think those outside receivers, because if I'm Ohio State, I'm just going to be like, all right, can't let anything happen in the middle of the field. We just have to lock down the outside. And when you do that, you kind of load up the box from that situation. And, they're going to be well coached up front, as they always have been. Coach Johnson's over there. Yeah, I think it's going to be more of a play calling situation to kind of limit that from happening than it is anything else.
This is a big deal for Julian Fleming. Ohio State transfer wide receiver, spent 4 years there, was recruited by Penn State and Ohio State, comes back home to Pennsylvania playing for Penn State. He had an up and down game against Wisconsin, was a big deal in the USC game and helping Penn State mount their comeback there in the second half. Some really critical catches. So you can imagine the emotion that is going to be at play for him in this game. You need Harrison Wallace to have a good game. You need Liam Clifford to be Mr. Reliable. I'd love to see Omari Evans get involved because I do think there's going to be opportunities over the top with this secondary. And if Tyler Warren, for instance, the way that you were talking about it going into Wisconsin, if Tyler Warren is doubled by Ohio State, there will be opportunities for everybody else to get involved, and you have to capitalize on that. In terms of Penn State's running backs, we talked about it after the Wisconsin game, is that the run game just wasn't as effective as we've seen it in the past. It wasn't as effective as we've seen it earlier on this season against USC. So it's a couple of games in a row where it's like, what's going on here? To your eyes, what's the issue right now with Penn State's running game?
I don't know if it's an execution thing or if it's like taking what the defense gives you. I mean, sometimes defense teams are coming in and saying like, "Hey, we're going to stop the run, like make them beat us another way." And I think that's kind of been the game plan from the last couple defensive coordinators or offensive. I mean, teams that we have played from that standpoint. And it's again, we talked about it earlier in the season when the things were opening up, whether it was bigger passes and things of that nature, when we start to engage with defenders. These guys, whether they're double mugs and doing different type of man blitzes where our running backs can't really get, I'm saying, going, right? And like kind of keen on that situation. It's critical for the receivers to have a big game to kind of loosen that box up a little bit so the guys can have some clean running lanes and engage with defenders 4 or 5 yards down the field so they can kind of make something happen and wiggle a little bit.
On the subject of injuries, as we discussed, the quarterback situation, game time decision for Drew Aller, which again, I was ecstatic to hear James Franklin say that because, yeah, why would you say on Monday or Tuesday that it's like, yeah, he can play. Keep Ohio State guessing. Anthony Donko is another guy who was dinged up against Wisconsin, right tackle. Donko's played very well this year, has been in and out of the lineup as there's been a lot of bumps and bruises. So James Franklin said earlier on this week that they will need Donko and Nolan Rucci to be available and to be able to play in this game. I don't think he made it perfectly clear that Anthony Donko would or would not play. If I have that wrong, my mistake there. But if I recall correctly, he said that they're going to need both of them. So that didn't necessarily answer anybody's questions, which is good. And I come back to those defensive ends for Ohio State. I don't need to remind anybody what JT Tuimoloau did 2 years ago to this offense. Very, very different personnel. That was rough to watch. But in terms of the way Penn State's tackles have played thus far this year, you and I and everybody that's covered this team since the offseason has said, hey, we're interested to see how the tackle spot goes. So regardless of who is in there consistently at right tackle, we know that Drew Shelton is holding things down at left tackle. How do you feel about Penn State's tackles and the offensive line playing against this Ohio State defensive line?
I feel good about it, but at the same time, like you said, there's some nightmares about what Ohio State has done from just the rush game or the defensive line in general. But yeah, I think there's some things that tighten up, but I guess I don't have too much of a strong opinion because again, how our offense has been kind of moving, we haven't really left anybody out there to dry or just like on different one-on-one matchups. But historically, Ohio State comes ready to play and rush the passer for this front four, and we have to be able to slow that down if we want our quarterbacks to get out the game healthy and make some plays and win this matchup.
This episode of State of State is presented in part by Melon. Now, for those of you who've been watching this podcast for quite some time, you know that Justin and I are both big hat guys. Now, when I was introduced to Melon, I immediately saw how durable and comfortable their hats are. Great color options, great sizing options as well. For me, someone who likes to go to a lot of different football games and tailgates throughout the year, I need a hat that's going to be flexible depending on the weather. If it's hot out, I want something that's breathable, and that's something that Melon hats provide. And also, if it's inclement weather, that's going to be nasty out, then I need a hat that's not going to lose its shape if you get them wet. In fact, if you need to wash a Melon hat, they come right back to life and they look brand new if you throw them in the wash. So that's something I absolutely love. So if you're looking for a hat as tough as you, check out Melon. You won't wear anything else after you get one for yourself. If you're looking for the world's most durable hat, look no further. Go to melon.com. That's MELIN.com and put it to the test yourself. This podcast is brought to you in part by Cherry Bundy. Cherry Bundy is a recovery product that's in the locker room for the Penn State Nittany Lions football program, and we are so proud to have them as a sponsor to get the message out there to help you with your fitness, your performance, and your recovery. Tart cherries are the highest antioxidant fruit or vegetable in the world. They're a natural anti-inflammatory with incredible benefits such as reduced soreness, increased recovery, contains naturally occurring melatonin to help improve your sleep and also help support your immunity. Cherry Bundy is used by nearly 500 collegiate and professional sports teams, including Penn State. That's 66 out of 67 Power 4 conference football teams, plus every NCAA football and basketball national champion since 2007. Goes deeper than that. In the National Football League, 10 of the last 11 Super Bowl champions have used Cherry Bundy. Every team playing in Europe or Brazil this season had Cherry Bundy with them. You can check out Cherry Bundy right now at cherrybundy.com or Amazon. Flipping to Ohio State's offense versus Penn State's defense. Quarterback Will Howard has a very interesting skill set in that he's a capable passer, he's a big body, he's a capable runner. Now, a lot of people may throw flack at him for the last few moments of the Oregon game, but he is very, very good. He has really done a nice job steering this offense in the right direction. He has taken advantage of the weapons that he has. He only had to complete 13 out of 16 passes against Nebraska. But again, I mentioned the issues for Ohio State on third down against a Nebraska defense that can be a little Jekyll and Hyde, a defensive line for Nebraska that is talented. They gave Ohio State some fits in terms of the running game. What I saw on tape for Ohio State against Nebraska is, well, Ohio State has receivers that you just mentioned, the likes of Smith, Egbuka, Tate, that can take the top off the secondary. And it's so funny. You and I were just discussing this after the Wisconsin game. There were plenty of people saying, why is Penn State playing so much man? Why is everything getting funneled to the inside? Why is Penn State continually giving up 7-yard completions on slants, et cetera, everything getting funneled inside? Well, if you look at the Ohio State game and the way that they play offensively, look at their big plays that they had against Nebraska. Ohio State had 285 yards of total offense. 100 of those yards came on 2 touchdown passes, one to Smith for 60 yards, one to Tate for 40 yards. So you take that away, Ohio State managed 185 yards at home against Nebraska. So if you limit the explosive play and you don't allow the receivers to get over the top on you or to the outside, you're going to have a better chance against them. And Justin, guess what Lockdown U loves to do? We will let you go inside where you can meet, 7 other guys wearing blue shirts, and we are not going to let you beat us deep. From what you've seen from Penn State's defense this year, do you have concerns about that big playability that Ohio State presents in the passing game, going over the top, going to the outside?
I think whenever you have one-touch guys on the field, you have to be concerned about guys going up top. I think that's their value, and that's the scary part of them. But when you keep them bottled up, you have a chance to really capitalize on some opportunities. And I think Penn State, we've seen, Lockdown U, hence the name, has done a great job with balling those, explosive plays up. I think there's only been one that I can remember. Maybe that was like a run play against USC, where it was like a true explosive, right? But we're playing it. It's a different level of athletes. You got to understand that sometimes when you're boxing a champion, haymakers might land. So with that being said, I just don't think it can be a continuous situation. Will they bust one or make a play? Yeah, those guys are on scholarship and get paid as well. Like, they put some money in there. So that comes with the territory. But I don't think it's to this case where we can't match up. I'm just kind of having a flashback to 2017 or 18 when we were at the Horseshoe, and I just remember man, these dudes are all over at any moment. I don't feel that way anymore. I don't feel that way about the secondary. I don't feel that way about Ohio State's skill guys against Penn State skill guys. And I think that it's going to be a battle, but nothing that blows our top off.
If there was ever a game it would be nice to have KJ Winston, this would have been it. But I still feel really good about Penn State's secondary, and the guys that have gotten in there, DeJuan Lane, Elliott Washington, have played well. And I have less concerns as the season has gone on regarding the defensive backs. I was talking about Will Howard before. What do you think about his overall skill set? Because inevitably, at whatever level of football, you've seen guys like him. He draws comparisons to Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills. I wouldn't say he's the exact same ceiling in terms of potential, but a similar body type, similar athlete.
That's a tall order. Josh Allen's a pretty freaky type of, a little bit there. I wouldn't see him as that. He's a good quarterback, you know what I mean? I not to rag on him, but he just kind of threw out that Josh Allen. I don't think he's that from a standpoint. He might be athletic, but we'll see. He's coming in with a chip on the shoulder. He had that Penn State didn't recruit me thing going on. So it's always when you got guys like that, you got to be prepared for. It's like being curled up in in the corner like a snake, like they're ready to strike. So as long as we just make sure that thing stays under wraps, I don't think he's anything. Oh, maybe eat my words, but anything super special to the point of taking over a game against us.
It's interesting that Howard said what he said because I didn't feel like there was a lot of malice in what he was saying.
Nah.
The way he said it was he grew up as a Penn State fan. And I think I saw it was one of our friends over at Blue White Illustrated posted that Will Howard was a 3-star quarterback and he was not recruited by Penn State or Ohio State. And the fact that he popped up at Kansas State, got an opportunity, made the most of it, and now is transferred to Ohio State shows just his overall talent. And you and I talk about it ad nauseum on this show, is that the stars next to your name don't tell the entire story. So I'm very thrilled to see the success of a young person and him making it to where he has made it to be the starting quarterback for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Is an immense amount of pressure. So I don't necessarily wish that on anybody. So I really didn't take a lot of exception to it. I know there's a lot of Penn State fans that'll be like, oh, he's ticked off. We didn't take him. Maybe you weren't good enough to play here, something like that. And maybe it turns into some bulletin board material, but I just didn't think all that much of it.
Nah, I mean, he said it. So I mean, it's a real thing. Like I think for him to say it in the press conference, like it's something that really eats at you. I remember going through the recruiting process long, many moons, right? 20 plus years ago. And certain coaches that said things where it was like, oh, we got to see you in camp. And, you stick with those. Then you play them. And it's like, I remember that. Like, I remember Tennessee was one of those for me. Philip Fulmer. He was like, hey, you got to come down to camp. They offered me and all that good stuff. But I remember it was just like, wait, you think I'm not as good as everybody around you says I'm good? So it's funny when you have, it shows the competitive nature of that player. So that's the tip my hat to him and just saying like, well, coming in as a competitor, if he has, that on his back. I remember the receiver for the St. Amon Brown, he can list every receiver that was drafted before him. When you get guys that have like that maniacal grudge holding, you gotta watch out for those guys. So that's the one thing I will. Tom Brady, there you go. Like you gotta watch out for those guys. That's the balancing act there.
In terms of Ohio State's running game, you talked about it before. Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, who Penn State fans have nightmares of from the Peach Bowl that we just played in this past December in Atlanta. He was playing for the Ole Miss Rebels at the time, and Ole Miss really had their way with Penn State in Atlanta. Quinshon Judkins was a big reason why he transfers to Ohio State in the offseason. Earlier on this year, the two-headed monster of Judkins and Henderson looked really sharp. They too have had their issues running the football. Their starting left tackle, Simmons, was lost for the year earlier on. So there's been a lot of questions about how this offensive line is going to move forward. Watching them against Nebraska, they were not bullying Nebraska off the line of scrimmage. And that was not necessarily something they had done all season long. I think because of the inferior competition, they have been able to throw people around a little bit. But then seeing them against some of the stronger defensive lines and front sevens that the Big Ten has to offer, you've not necessarily seen this prove to be one of the best offensive lines, especially rushing the football in the Big Ten in college football. So it's not that lack of ability at running back. When you know that as a defender, there's deficiencies with the offensive line, it's not that the ball carrier doesn't matter, but how do you handle that as a defense? Because you still have to respect those guys back there.
I'm a firm believer in doing focus on what you have to do and like stay process oriented. As long as you're doing that type of thing where you're, like you're saying, playing with your right techniques, trusting the defensive calls that are coming in, I let the chips fall where they may. The thing that comes up when you have personnel discrepancy where like a lot of those things are a little bit more tighter, a lot tighter, right? But when the personnel is even, man, you got to come with your lunch pail, play a little bit of the chess game and let the chips fall where they may.
This Ohio State offense certainly has the ability to be explosive. The way that Penn State has played on defense against USC, there were certainly issues in terms of giving up points. That's probably the only example so far this year. And you can look at that as, okay, it was a road game environment, it was cross country. There's a couple of different reasons why some of that happened. But against Ohio State, it's going to be a completely different animal in that Ohio State's playmakers on offense are certainly better than what USC has. From what you saw from Penn State defensively against Wisconsin, Were there elements that you were like, yeah, this is going to translate against Ohio State, or elements here and there where it's like they need to clean that up against the Buckeyes?
I think everything that Penn State does on offense and defense translates to every team because they can attack you different ways. They have athletes all over on all three levels, and you have position flexibility on offense and defense. And when you have that, I mean, you can play with anybody. It just comes down to the game plan that shows up on Saturdays and how guys wake up and get their steak and eggs in the morning from that standpoint, right? So I think that's been one of the true advantages of Penn State's team is that the way that they play is a traveling type of football, right? Like whether it's blocking well, playing defense up front well, covering well, not giving up the big plays, making the big plays, beating guys down, and then finishing while being battle tested. That gumbo mixture of football principles travels well every week, right? Like, so I think as long as they continue to stick to that, cooking with gas, man.
For those of you that saw James Franklin's press conference, he didn't answer the question about what Penn State's identity is. That's the answer. I can understand why Franklin didn't give an answer. He doesn't want to give out any information of like, here's what we do well or something like that. Probably could have answered the question, but I understood his point about we're looking at everybody else's identity and then we're looking at their strengths and we're being amorphous and we're working around you and we're seeing what your strengths are and then we're attempting to take away those strengths. One thing I noticed against Wisconsin, I'm curious how you feel about it. Penn State's pass rush was not a tremendous factor in this game. And a lot of that was because Wisconsin, kind of like Bowling Green, kind of like USC, got the ball out quickly. Will Howard is somebody who will elongate the play with his legs and tries to make some things happen. Will try to get the ball out quickly for sure against Penn State. Any concerns about Penn State's pass rush or just, hey, that's what was required that Saturday night in Wisconsin?
I think that's what was required Saturday night in Wisconsin, right? A different situation when you're away at night, dealing with different emotions from the other team, right? That's a real thing when we talk about momentum within game situations, and you have to weather those storms in a different way versus being at home, noon, in your own comfort of your spot and understanding that you might be a little bit more on the offensive and more attack with a team coming in like Ohio State. So I think that's what the main difference between the two, but I think it's perfectly fine.
One question that just popped into my head, I know we talked about the offense earlier, but everybody talked about Andy Kotelnicki when he was hired. Everybody looked at what he had done at Kansas, especially the previous season. And they're like, oh, is this exactly what we're inheriting? Does this work for us? Well, last year at Kansas, Kotelnicki implemented a 2-quarterback system quite often. Now, he had 2 very mobile quarterbacks in Daniels and Bean. If Drew Aller and Bo Pribula are both healthy and able to go in this game, and we expect Bo to be able to, Aller is still a question mark. What's the likelihood that you see the Kansas 2-quarterback offense implemented by Andy Kotelnicki against Ohio State?
Man, it's possible, right? If he has it in his playbook, I think it's something that you can anticipate. I think Ohio State's probably anticipating that and probably taking some practice time away from the base level things. As we talked about it earlier in the season, we just like that root approach where it's like growing it up to make sure when we get to this part of the season, the defensive coordinators and staff and GAs, like they're probably scrambling to make sure they have answers for everything. And then you want to create a preparation for the other team where they're chasing ghosts, where they're just practicing stuff that we're never going to see. And then hit them with things that they haven't seen before, vice versa. So yeah, you can expect that 2-quarterback set, especially if it's in his arsenal, and we have the personnel to do it. And I think if Drew's healthy enough and we can continue to roll, I think that keeps Ohio State on its heels instead of, again, teeing off in that type of attack position.
Last thing, both ESPN's College Game Day and Fox's Big Noon Kickoff crews will be on opposite sides of Beaver Stadium, but they're both going to be in State College, Pennsylvania.
TV wars.
Considering that this game is being played at 12 p.m. Eastern because of Big Noon Kickoff, and Penn State fans literally hate that, how do you think the Fox crew is going to be received versus the ESPN crew?
I mean, different vibes, right?
I'm curious to see the turnout on either side, and I'm also curious to see how hostile one is versus the other.
I mean, shout out my guy Pat McAfee, but I mean, he's been getting the crowds going, so I think a lot of the students are going to kind of venture towards that section, and they're giving away about 100K for those field goal kicks too. So I think that gets
Good move.
money talks, right? So I think that gets the student section going, and the big noon, nothing wrong with those. It's just a different vibe. It's a different vibe, and they don't like them.
I am really interested to see if they get booed the entire time they're out there, or if anybody even bothers to show up. I'm sure people will be standing there, but like, is it just drastically less in one direction or the other?
We got to remember, it's probably going to be all the students at the college game day, and then all of the tailgaters and adults at the big noon kickoff with their young kids, maybe. I think that will be more of the vibe. Split. We got to have about 500,000 people outside the stadium, so there's going to be. I think everybody's going to have some fans and spectators there.
Traffic's going to be rough this weekend, and also Urban Meyer sitting on that Fox panel. Pat McAfee, my former coworker, once upon a time, he has been speaking very highly of Penn State for a long time. So I hope a lot of people show up and support Pat. I know he did his show at West Virginia when Penn State was playing West Virginia to kick off the season. Of course, he was supporting his alma mater, but go support Pat. Thank you all so much for joining us. This is far and away Penn State's biggest game of the year. How this game goes, win or loss, is going to have immense ramifications on how the rest of this season looks for the Penn State Nittany Lions. I hope for those of you going, you're loud, especially on those third downs and such, as James Franklin said, considering the way Ohio State struggled against Nebraska. That's going to be a factor in this game, regardless of the time of day. So I'm hoping Penn State fans bring their absolute best this Saturday at Beaver Stadium. Thank you for joining us. Like, comment, subscribe, rate us, turn on notifications, get at us on social media at State of State Pod, get in our comment section on YouTube. And if you haven't done so already, become a member of our YouTube channel and get all upcoming episodes of State of State, plus our entire members only playlist, ad-free, commercial-free for just 99 cents a month. You can hit the join button on our homepage, or you can follow the link in the description of this podcast. Enjoy Penn State versus Ohio State this Saturday. Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Also, let us know what you think of the show on social media, and check out all of our content on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Search for the handle at State of State Pod. State of State is presented by Bet Online and by Blue White Outfitters.